colleagues. Let me call this meeting to order and welcome you back from our constituency weeks. I hope they were productive for you and your teams. Also to welcome our wayward travelers from Scandinavia, who I understand had a great trip. We'll hopefully get some feedback from Gaetan, from Corey, and from Mario before not too long. As you know, our forestry study is still a work in progress. And with that, colleagues, I would like to acknowledge that we're meeting on the unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation, and this is meeting number 38 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Natural Resources. Today's meeting is taking place in hybrid format. We do have some people online today, correct, Mr. Clerk? Yes. And just like to remind participants of the following points before speaking. Please wait until I recognize you. And for those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. I would like to remind witnesses that committee members may ask questions in either French or English. If you will need interpretation, please take a moment now to prepare your earpiece and select the listening channel you need in advance in order to take full advantage of the time allotted for questions and answers. And do think of our amazing interpreters. If you would kindly not talk too fast or bang things around your microphone, I know that our interpreters would appreciate that, as would we. And for members participating in person or Zoom, please raise your hand if you wish to speak. The committee clerks and I will do our best to maintain a consolidated speaking order. And a reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted on Thursday, April 23, 2026, the committee shall commence its study of Canada's electrification, energy self-sufficiency, and domestic energy security. And I would like to welcome our witnesses. There's a long list, colleagues, so bear with me. We have Darren from the Canadian Energy Regulator, Darren Christie, Chief Economist, who joins us by video conference, Ganesh Daluwira, Technical Leader, Energy Outlooks, also by video conference, from the Department of Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs, Joanna Ankersmit, Acting Assistant Deputy Minister, Northern Affairs Organization, and from the Department of Natural Resources, Drew Leyburn, Assistant Deputy Minister, Energy Systems Sector, Andre Bernier, Director General, Electricity Systems Branch, Energy Systems Sector, Michael Rao, Director General, Policy and Planning Branch, Fuels Sector, and from Environment and Climate Change Canada, Megan Nichols, Assistant Deputy Minister, and Karishma Barua, Director, Electricity and Combustion Division. All of our virtual witnesses have conducted a mandatory witness onboarding test, and each of our delegations will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks, after which we will open the floor to questions. And so I'm first going to go to Mr. Christie, representing the Canadian Energy Regulator. You have the floor for 5 minutes. Mr. Christie.
Thank you. Good morning. Bonjour, je vous remercie d'avoir...
Good morning. Thank you for inviting the Canada Energy Regulator to appear before you today. My name is Darren Christie, Chief Economist at the CER. I am joined today by Dr. Ganesh Daluwira, our Technical Leader for Energy Outlooks. I'm appearing before you today from Calgary, Alberta, located within Treaty 7 territory, the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, which includes the Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai nations. Treaty 7 is also home to the Tsuut'ina First Nation and the Stoney Nakoda, Bearspaw, and Goodstoney nations. I'd also like to recognize the Métis, who have settled in southern Alberta and call this place home.
Has broadly described its mandate in other recent appearances before this committee, I will briefly elaborate on the CER's electricity mandate today, given its prominence in your study. The CER's electricity mandate, as set out in the CER Act, includes regulating the construction and operation of international power lines and designated interprovincial power lines, offshore renewable energy projects and offshore power lines, and electricity exports. The mandate also includes providing supply and markets information. Provinces regulate development, conservation, and management of sites within a province for the generation and production of electrical energy, as expressly stated in the Constitution. As a result, the CER's role in electricity is relatively limited. The electricity mandate that we do have comprises two broad components, the adjudication function and the energy information function, and I will address each in turn. La fonction décisionnelle liée à l'électricité compose.
The decision-making function has two distinct aspects, the construction and the operation of international and interprovincial electric supply lines and electricity exports. Before an international line can be constructed to transport electricity, a company must present a request for a permit or certificate. So far, we have provided about 25 CER-issued permits and certificates, and we regulate approximately 1,500 kilometers of international power lines. The second aspect of our adjudication process concerns electricity exports. The Commission issues permits or licenses to companies to export electricity internationally. In assessing an export application, the CER can only consider the effect of the exports on neighboring provinces and on fair market access for Canadians. The CER does not regulate electricity imports or interprovincial electricity trade.
CER is also responsible for advising and reporting on energy matters. As part of this, in March, the CER released the latest edition of its flagship Energy Futures series, Canada's Energy Futures 2026, which explores 4 possible scenarios for Canadian energy over the long term. These include a baseline current measures scenario reflecting policies in place as of November 2025, as well as higher and lower scenarios that produce a range around the current measures scenario, as well as a net zero emission scenario. I'd like to highlight a few key findings from EF 2026 that we believe are relevant to your current study. First, electricity generation grows in every scenario through 2050, driven by electrification of existing energy end uses, economic and population growth, and new demands in areas such as hydrogen production and data centers. Depending on the scenario, electricity demand is expected to increase between 30% and 120% from 2023 levels, resulting in installed generation capacity rising substantially from roughly 160 gigawatts in 2023 to between 270 and 400 gigawatts by 2050. Wind power accounts for the largest share of new capacity, supported by growth in hydro, solar, nuclear batteries, and natural gas with carbon capture. Additionally, interprovincial transmission interties play a growing role in balancing supply and demand variations across provincial systems, with interprovincial transmission capacity growing roughly 70% by 2050 in all scenarios. Energy Futures 2026 also provides some analysis of energy self-sufficiency and security. In particular, it highlights that in most scenarios, Central Canada's substantial dependence on natural gas and crude oil produced in or transiting through the U.S. would continue based on current pipeline configurations. Only in the Canada Net Zero scenario does Central Canada use significantly less natural gas and refined petroleum products by 2050, which could reduce the region's reliance on energy coming from or through the U.S. En terminant, la Régie est en mesure d'évaluer.
In closing, the CER remains ready to assess all applications that we receive and will continue to provide timely, evidence-based energy information to inform the energy conservation activities of Canada. Thank you for the opportunity to appear today, and we look forward to your questions.
Merci beaucoup, monsieur. Nous allons passer à monsieur Leyburn, qui représente NR Cannes. Vous avez 5 minutes.
sits foundational to Canada's economy, competitiveness, and national resilience. Canadians rely on secure and affordable energy every day to heat their homes, power businesses, move goods, support industry, and to connect communities across our country. And so Canada starts from a position of considerable strength. We have abundant resources, a diverse energy mix, strong institutions, significant infrastructure, and deeply integrated trade relationships. Mais la sécurité énergétique n'est jamais acquise.
Yet energy security is not a done deal. Current geopolitical instability reminds us just how much world energy markets are interconnected. The events underway thousands of kilometers away from us can have real effects on our energy systems and therefore on our economy and on our daily lives.
Extreme weather, aging infrastructure, cyber threats, supply chain pressures, and rising demand affect not only global markets, but also Canada's domestic ability to produce, move, store, and deliver energy reliably and affordably. That is why energy security must be understood as more than supply alone. It is about the resilience of the full energy system: production, transportation, storage, refining, distribution, emergency preparedness, infrastructure protection, and the ability to respond quickly when disruptions occur. In the Canadian context, the concept of energy independence also requires nuance. As a major energy producer and exporter, energy independence should not mean self-isolation. It is better understood as the capacity to make sovereign choices, to produce, move, secure, and trade energy in ways that best support Canadian interests. Dans cette optique, nous avons récemment publié
to these ends, we've recently published a document for Canada, A Strong Economy of an Electrified Canada.
And that growing the electricity sector in an affordable manner is key to both economic prosperity and reducing emissions. Canada already has one of the cleanest grids in the world, with about 80% of electricity powered by non-emitting sources. Building the infrastructure needed to double Canada's electricity systems will require generational investments in transmission, generation, distribution, storage, and grid modernization. L'électrification de l'économie est
It's essential to electrify our economy to reduce emissions and to support our competitivity long term.
Strategy acknowledges where electricity is provincial territorial jurisdiction and calls for even closer collaboration with provinces and territories, utilities, Indigenous partners, industry, investors, and other partners. Des travaux ont déjà
Work is already underway. Work is underway, in particular with Bill S4, an act to amend the Energy Efficiency Act, which will prepare the field for modern demand management programs.
For up to 1 million households through financing, grants, and complementary measures. We have also committed to exploring expanded support for interprovincial transmission through investment tax credits and the development of new comprehensive transmission interconnect investment strategy for interties. Mais la sécurité énergétique nationale.
But our national energy security depends on more than electricity. It also relies on all sources of energy, on systems, infrastructure, and our capacity that we as Canadians and our economy depend on. Canada has a major asset: the rich and diverse energy resources, as well as oil and gas and hydroelectricity, nuclear and renewable energies that we do have.
About 10% of the world's proven oil reserves and 3% of its proven natural gas reserves, while accounting for roughly 9% of global exports and 7% of gas exports. However, the ongoing conflict in the Middle East has contributed to a significant and sustained disruption in global oil and gas markets. Même si le Canada est moins exposé aux pénuries.
Although Canada is less exposed to direct shortages of crude oil, thanks to integrated and diversified supply chains, it's not protected from the world context, rather, which Canadians are already feeling.
Supplier of responsibly produced energy, with LNG Canada exporting approximately 14 million tons per year, and the Trans Mountain Pipeline with the capacity to send up to 890,000 barrels of crude oil per day. Alongside future LNG, LPG, and oil exports from projects under construction, we are reinforcing our alliances while supporting economic growth and prosperity at home. Energy security requires hand-in-hand cooperation between the federal government and provincial and territorial partners. Ce n'est pas dicter des solutions, mais comprendre leur réalité et leur
We can't dictate solutions. We need to understand their realities and their challenges and work together to coordinate a combined response.
from a position of strength, but also at a time of growing pressure on energy systems. Electricity, energy security, and energy independence are closely connected. The common objective is a reliable, affordable, and resilient energy system for Canadians now and in the future. Thank you.
To Mr. Leyburn, and thank you to our presenters, two very comprehensive presentations, and we will now move on to questions, as we always do, and we're going to start with Mr. Tucker for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for our witnesses for appearing today. To our natural resources officials, we hear of this modeling that we need to double electricity. I've heard it from multiple sources. Just want to understand, has the department kind of modeled what that would look like out?
Mr. Chair, I might direct the question to the energy regulator who actually has done some of that scenario building.
Sure, thank you. Thanks for the question. Yeah, in our Energy Futures report, we have 4 different scenarios, and the amount of demand growth is something that is endogenous, so it's actually a result of the kind of bottom-up scenario construction that we've done. And then what happens, so we see, I mentioned this in the opening remarks, depending on the scenario, demand goes up by 30% to 120% above 2023 levels by 2050. And then what we model is how the electricity grid responds based on, assumptions around things like costs of different generation technologies, efficiencies of those technologies, and so on.
On that example, then, let's take the low end. So if there's a 30% increase by 2050, what does that cost?
I don't have the exact cost numbers at my fingertips. What I can say is that we have, as noted in the report, when we look at the cost of electricity on a per unit basis, we do see it increasing in the future, and that increase is fairly similar to the rate of increase that we've seen in recent history, and it's also going forward pretty close to the general rate of inflation.
Just to confirm, so you have the numbers, just not with you right now.
So what we have is the cost. We have a cost number. It doesn't include some elements of the provincial system specifically, but it includes large transmission as well as generation. And then when we, what I just noted in terms of the cost impacts relative to inflation, that does include some assumptions around those provincial components as well.
If I then could I get you to table those costs, and along with which costs associated with which provinces? Because we do have a concern about the affordability in Canada, and there's some provinces that are suffering more than others, as much as all Canadians have been suffering for the last 10 years. It's been more acute in other areas. So I would be interested in the tabling of those numbers. Just on the process of this modeling that you guys have done, when was the last time that this modeling was done, say 20 years ago? Is there a report that showed what we might need today?
Yeah, so over time, the exact frequency has varied, but it's a report that, has at times come out annually. This most recent one was about almost 3 years after the last one, but so somewhere in that 20-year range, certainly.
Yeah, if
we
you
would
could
have another one.
Table the report that came out 20 to 25 years ago, and also your response on how accurate that modeling would be. I'll ask you to table that after the meeting. And a question on what assurances do Canadians would have that this electricity strategy is not just another white elephant?
I think I can probably take that
Thank
one,
you.
given that we were responsible for the electricity strategy. I think we took a pragmatic approach to developing the electricity strategy, working really closely with our colleagues in provinces and territories, spoke to electricity utilities, end users, and tried to get the best sense of what some of the most realistic expectations were about the progression of the electricity system over the next few decades. Just to your earlier question, our strategy does note that this is a significant financial undertaking, over $1 trillion. Actually, if you ask Electricity Canada, their number is closer to $2 trillion that they see. But that needs to be observed against the baseline of tens of billions of dollars of electricity spending that is already happening and has been happening year over year for decades.
And just so that the viewers at home understand, when was the last time that we had electricity shortfalls like we're experiencing now, or what is modeled to be out in the near future?
Andre might be able to jump on with further detail, but what I can say is the last couple of years have been somewhat anomalous in that a number of hydro projects have underproduced compared to their traditional production because of climate-induced drought. But Andre, you might be able to talk about the longer trajectory.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. I think Canada's fortunate to have a very reliable electricity system. The challenge, if I could maybe propose a reframing, it would be less shortfall and more constrained opportunity, in the sense that if you don't have the power available, then you're not able to necessarily attract new industry that's power intensive. There are you have moments where you've come a little bit shorter. I know the Alberta's grid was a little more challenged a couple of years ago, but they've added a lot of capacity since then. So my view is that from Canada's perspective, it's probably more a limit on opportunity as opposed to an active risk of not having enough electricity at any given moment.
Yep. Thank you very much, our witnesses, for being here today, and thanks for keeping the strategy to keep the lights on.
Literally. Thank you, Mr. Tucker. We're going to go on to Mr. Gay, 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Leyburn, you actually did mention that the National Electricity Strategy was actually under the leadership of NRCan to produce. And the one thing that touched everyone's imagination is the requirement, the ambition to double by 2050. You actually mentioned that. Can you actually go further into the NRCan role in helping provinces and territory plan that scale of build out while respecting the jurisdiction of each provinces?
I'm actually going to hand it over to my colleague Andre, because he's dealing with this every day.
Yeah. I think I want to begin, thank you for the question, with acknowledging the Constitution is the beginning and sort of endpoint for understanding who's the primary decision maker. So the federal government is looking at this from the perspective of partnership. As you go east to west, the geography plays a large role in determining what options provinces have. Some have abundant hydro resources, others wind, natural gas, others have built out a nuclear fleet. And so the posture of the strategy is one of partnership and collaboration. So I think it would be not for us to dictate what the priorities should be, but to be responsive to where the provinces have initiative. As I'd say, for example, Ontario is clearly has ambitions to build out its available nuclear supply. It's acting in support of that, and so on. And so I'd say the importance of bilateral conversations, but also regional conversations, is critical to success from our perspective. We don't want to be dictating what the electricity mix should look like from Ottawa.
Je vais aller en français maintenant parce que
I will switch to French. You have mentioned a number of regions. Let's stick to the east of Canada and to Quebec. We do know that at present, as of now and into the future, there are some constraints on Quebec's capacity. Meanwhile, there are projects being discussed for wind power in the Maritimes, in Nova Scotia. There's the hydroelectric Gull Island project for Labrador. Could you tell us, please, how NRCan sees these projects and what effect they could have on Canadians and how beneficial they can be for Quebecers as well. Thank you very much for the question. I would like to provide a specific answer to each project, if possible. I think the combination of projects to provide supplementary electricity does meet the need and will allow for growing our economy. Yet it's a bit difficult to comment on the specific projects. You see, our role is really hands-off when it comes to the specific projects. Okay, I hear that, but the electricity strategy speaks of transmission interties, interprovincial interties, and perhaps you could tell us a bit more about that and the benefits of such interties. And all said and done, the strategy also promises that eventually the Canadians as consumers will benefit from this, the economy as well. So how are we going to get there? Thank you very much. The provincial systems aren't totally isolated, but at present the interties are quite limited. It's a matter of managing the variable production of some resources, such as wind power, and for that you need a larger space to work in. Each province has advantages and disadvantages. In British Columbia, for example, wind power potential isn't as great as in, let's say, Alberta, which is large and flat. So an intertie there could be helpful to consumers in each of those provinces. It's not just any sort of integration we need to work towards, but given that the integration right now is very limited, it is our intention to really support greater numbers of interties with benefits.
There's a lot of talk, and Mr. Leyburn, you can actually direct to whoever is best appropriate to answer this question, but one project, one review. We hear this theme again and again. How does it work? How do we negotiate that with the provinces, and how do we get to the benefits of that quickly?
And that'll have to be a quick answer. Just got 20 seconds left.
I guess the shortest answer would be there were some significant measures put forward a few weeks ago through the Getting Major Projects Built in Canada discussion paper that touched on some of those the various ways that we can modernize our regulatory system and streamline some processes.
Thank you. Monsieur Simard, 6 minutes, allez-y.
You have 6 minutes, sir. The floor is yours. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I'm very happy that we've started this study. I don't share the enthusiasm that my colleague across the way seems to have. Doubling electricity production in Canada. Well, when you look at the figures, and you'll see later that, I have read Professor Rousseau's document, so keeping the figures in mind, we see that Canada is really dragging its feet. If we look at the energy mix, it's like 17% of our electricity sourcing is from electricity. If you consider China at present, they're at around 32% of their mix is electric. So if we go to 2050, if we double that, we'd be at 34%, and China is already at 32%, such a large world economy. So keeping this in perspective, and I think that our aim is certainly to be applauded, it's not really that ambitious, though. So let's keep that in mind as we launch our discussions. I'm concerned because I hear more and more now that electrification technologies are being used extensively in China so that they are getting the value chain and the infrastructure set in for that. And I'm not sure whether in your strategy there is, work to do that. How are we going to get a real Canadian and Quebec value chain in matters of electrification? There is, of course, the network. That's really important, the grid, but the value chain too. What can you say to that?
What I would say, yes, you are correct that electricity has been at a relatively stable contributor to the overall energy mix in Canada. We are approximately at the OECD average for electrification of our economy, which means we're not an outlier on either end of that equation. And as part of that doubling we talked about, we do see electricity taking an ever increasing role in that overall energy mix. But I would say as well that what we have that China and most OECD members don't have is an abundant fuel resource as well, which explains part of the reason why a country like China, for example, might be more tempted to move into electricity where they can be less dependent on imported fuel resources.
Une des grosses préoccupations.
One of the real concerns that seems like pretty obvious is linked to the fact that Quebec in the past created and developed and paid to get its electricity grid up and running without the federal government being involved. So we already have infrastructure. Moreover, Quebec is probably the province that has the most ambitious action plan in this matter, $200 billion through 2035, and 2035 is just around the corner. So how will we work up a strategy that is fair? Because I think that the needs in Ontario with the costs of nuclear energy will be much higher than what you can offer in support to Quebec, which already has its own infrastructure, that already has its own investment plan up and running. So when you think of setting in your strategy, will you take into account the specific needs of each province, including Quebec, of course, in order to ensure proper sharing of the sums that you will be distributing? Because at first sight, I do have the impression that the strategy could be set in and really allow the other provinces to catch up with Quebec, and that seems fundamentally unfair.
My starting response would be that the purpose of the strategy, as Andre and others have said, is to work closely with the provinces and territories. Most of the toolkit that we currently have available to support the transition towards greater electrification is pan-Canadian. So, for example, the investment tax credits are applicable regardless of which province or territory the activity is taking place and provide significant benefit to the province or territory that's using them. We have our SREPS renewables program, $4.5 billion, where expenditures are being made in every province across Canada. So making sure that we have an electricity strategy that reflects the unique differences of every province and every territory and every region means that we won't use the tools symmetrically or cookie-cutter way across every jurisdiction, but I am confident that we have a toolkit that does support every province, including in Quebec.
À mon souvenir, il y avait une demande.
As far as I remember, there was a recurring request as of about 10 years from Hydro-Quebec, well, less than 10 years, a request from Hydro-Quebec because look, I think that the interprovincial infrastructures do qualify for some tax credits, and Hydro-Quebec had applied to have intra-provincial structures also qualify for the tax credit. So in your strategy, will you change that? Thank you for the question. In this strategy, the federal government intends to provide support to transmission interties, interprovincial ones. That's the intention. Within provinces as well. That's the intention. Thank you very much, Mr.
Colleagues, that completes our first round of questioning. We're going to go on to our second, but before I do, welcome Mr. Rowe back. Seems to be a permanent fixture, and we're happy about that. Mr. Gunn, welcome, and welcome Mr. Watchorn to members sitting in for other members today. So with that, Mr. Rowe, 5 minutes.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me here today. I'm here looking for a lot of questions, a lot of answers today. Perhaps Mr. Leeburn could help me out. He's the Assistant Deputy Minister of Energy Systems. I'm kind of wondering, what's the plan here? I mean, energy demand is exploding in Canada. We have the resources. It seems to me that all we need is the access to markets, whether it's interprovincial or international, and then actually build these facilities. And does the government have a plan of funding the generation, the construction of the generation? And it's, I guess, a yes or no question. Is there a plan right now to fund the generation in Canada of these generation plants?
It's not yes, no, but I would say the federal government will be involved in much of the development, but ultimately it will be provinces, territories, the utilities, and private finance that produce the vast majority of expenditure to get the systems evolved.
So there's very limited loans and grants to, say, crown corporations or even private industry to actually jumpstart this generation facilities to meet this energy demand that we need.
No, we've got a pretty extensive toolkit. I mean, when we're talking about trillions of dollars here, the federal government will not be producing trillions of dollars of that investment, but we do have tens of billions of dollars in support already in play. The investment tax credits for clean electricity are worth tens of billions of dollars alone. I mentioned the $4.5 billion program we have at NRCan for renewable energy, SREPs. We've got the Canadian Infrastructure Bank, the Growth Fund. We're talking about dozens and dozens of billions of dollars that have been put forward towards modernizing the energy.
Good to see that you're putting in that investment, because I think it's very needed, and that was always a struggle for Newfoundland and Labrador to develop our resources, was just we need someone to write the check. So it's very good. But the other issue that we have in Canada is the interprovincial trade barriers. Some provinces put up big interprovincial trade barriers for other provinces putting it through. We've seen that. The Liberal government, the new Liberal government, talked big about reducing those interprovincial trade barriers to get to international markets. Is this government a part of their plan? Are we planning to use that money, those loans, those grants, to eliminate those interprovincial trade barriers, or are we going to just hand out the money without those conditions attached to the check?
The federal government will do everything it can to support greater energy trade, if we're specifically talking about energy here. On electricity, that's through supporting interties, which we've said has been a major focus. One of the early focuses of the investment tax credits was giving additional support for interties between provinces. We've got multiple examples where the federal government has recently and traditionally funded those interties. Most recently, I would say, probably with the New Brunswick-Nova Scotia intertie, which we contributed funding to earlier this year. And on other products, like fuel products and refined products, Mike, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about interprovincial trade there.
I mean, there's not really much in terms of interprovincial trade barriers at this point in the refined product space. Flow is pretty freely between provinces and territories, so I don't think there's a big issue on that particular front.
I think people in Newfoundland will be very surprised to hear about that, because we've been struggling to get our electricity through other provinces for a very long time, and there's some big barriers there, whether or not it's a physical barrier. So there's definitely some work we have to do, and it's disappointing to hear that we're not attaching conditions to those checks to make sure, and grants and loans, to make sure that we actually can build a Canada that's united under one flag, working together to create the superpower that we all dream about having, the energy superpower, to have leverage, geopolitical leverage against our friends down south. Something that us Conservatives have been very strong about, and something that Newfoundlanders and Labradorians are also very passionate about. And I think as Canadians, we're very passionate about. And I think this is something that, an avenue that we could definitely work on. So, this plan that we have, or what's going on, how much money we're giving to different projects. Are you guys, right now there's an MOU being signed between Newfoundland and Labrador, another province. I don't see the federal government sitting down at that table, and perhaps it's happening, conversations will be happening behind the scenes. Are you guys telling both provinces, look, this is what our plan is, this is what we're going to contribute, this is what we're going to do? Or is it kind of going to be wait till after the MOU is signed and after the deal is done until the federal government kind of comes in and says, actually, this is what we're going to do?
Yeah.
Does everyone actually know what's happening before the deal can be signed?
Time for a short answer.
If you're referring to, are you referring to a specific MOU? Sorry,
Yes.
the Alberta MOU or
Newfoundland and Labrador MOU?
Oh, I see. Well, no, yeah, I can respond quickly to that. We were very heartened to see a kind of a willingness to get to the table again. Both provinces have appointed very strong negotiators, and the federal government. Obviously, this is mostly a deal between two parties, but we think that project has significant interest for Canada, and we'll certainly do anything we can to help those two parties come to an agreement.
Okay, thank you.
Writing the check.
Thank you both for that exchange. And Mr. Watchorn, welcome to the committee. You have 5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci à tous les témoins d'être ici avec nous
Thank you,
aujourd'hui.
Mr. Chair, and thank you to all our witnesses for being here with us today. I have the honor of sitting on the National Defense Committee, and right now, much is being said about our security in the north there. Ms. Ankersmith seems to be interested in this topic. I'd like to know how our energy strategy will help the north have more secure access to energy. How will we move away from diesel and adopt other sources?
Yeah, we're working closely in the north, a number of departments. So this isn't just a national defense issue, but working with our partners in NRCan, CERNAC, CanNor, a number of departments that have to be involved in this. But most importantly, our territorial and the utilities and our Indigenous partners across the north. So it's a collective effort to work towards increasing the capacity of the north to meet the energy needs that will be coming with Arctic sovereignty. It will play into the execution of NRCan's strategy, and we look forward to working with them on that.
Great. We're talking a lot about dual-use technology, too. Dual use, for bases and communities. Do you see that as something that can be developed as we establish our security bases in the north?
Certainly, and that has been, I think, a very active conversation between our colleagues at National Defense with communities and with their territorial government partners and Indigenous partners as well.
Great, thank you. J'aimerais savoir également comment que le gouvernement fédéral...
I'd also like to know how the federal government can support Indigenous equity and fairness with Indigenous peoples as we go ahead.
Nous avons des difficultés d'interprétation.
Why don't I just say a few words to see... Mr. Saini, you want to put your earphone in? And we've paused your time, Mr. Watchorn. Mr. Saini, can you bonjour tout le monde?
Hello, everyone.
C'est bon?
It's working.
Mr. Watchorn, please continue. You've got a little over 3 minutes left.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Donc, merci, Monsieur le Président. Donc,
thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll repeat my question. How can the federal government support Indigenous fair deals as it goes forward with these projects?
There's a lot of ways. That's a big question. I mean, one of the programs that we have been running out of CERNAC is the Northern Reach program. And so that's a program that's been working with Indigenous communities over the last decade to really promote their own innovation in their communities. There's, across the 3 territories, 55 independent diesel grids. There's 3 minor or relatively small regional grids. So there's a lot of opportunity for growth and development in the Indigenous space. and they have they've been very active in projects across the 3 territories and in Inuit and Nangat. So I expect that there will be plenty of opportunity to work in partnership, like I said, with the other partners in this exercise to increase not only the off-diesel component and the renewable technology, which will increase the energy security of the territories in Inuit and Nangat, but also in Indigenous leadership as well. We have a number of projects, most recently Iqaluit Hydro, that has the potential to significantly reduce the diesel needed to power Iqaluit, the capital of Nunavut, and that is an Indigenous-led project that we really look forward to working with our partners on. Thanks for the question.
Merci beaucoup. Peut-être une dernière question.
Thank you very much. A last question. The guaranteed loans for Indigenous peoples, is this useful? Does it help them participate in these projects?
Had a number of positive reactions to that question, to that fund. My colleagues at NRCan may have some further comments on that, but I know that it's been very well received by our Indigenous partners across the country, but also in the north.
Y a-t-il d'autres commentaires là-dessus? Allez-y.
Any other comments? Go ahead.
I would also mention beyond the Indigenous Loan Guarantee Program, the Canada Infrastructure Bank has been working in partnership and facilitating Indigenous ownership of a number of projects across the country. And so they've become an increasingly, I'd say, a prominent player in terms of supporting equity and debt participation of Indigenous partners.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair.
Monsieur Simon, 2.5.
Mr. Simard, 2.5 minutes. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Claude and I have just come from a very important and interesting meeting with a service provider, a high-use energy provider, and there are 2 elements this brings to my mind. There are the infrastructures, the interties, and so forth. But on the other side, I don't see how you will be supporting the value chain that is starting to develop around electrification and the small service providers who do have a role. It's a very important role. You have mentioned it in your opening statements, your strategies of, storage strategies, and in particular for storage. And I think we're have a lot to do here in Canada to catch up on that. So in your strategy, I think you could provide specific support to these small service providers. Thank you very much for the question. The strategy has set out 8 action areas, and one is to strengthen the capacity in the value chain. But we need further analyses and conversations and collaboration to really be able to identify the opportunities, specific opportunities to do that. At present, we fully agree that it is an important matter, but we still need to identify which sectors, which companies, which industries are the most important ones to work with. So before that's done, before getting a real strategy, we'll have to wait a few more years to get that figured out. I hope that it won't be years, but rather months. But yes, that's what we're working on. Okay, but at present, I mean, have you presented all this? You mentioned 8, axes or domains or areas of work. Have you gone public with that? Yes, it's part of the strategy. It's in the strategy. All right, the 8 areas are identified in the strategy. Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome to the committee. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Christie, as I'm sure you know, there are 2 hydroelectric dams located in the city of Powell River. Dams that were built more than 100 years ago to power the local pulp mill and create thousands of jobs. They quite literally built the city of Powell River, but about 10 years ago that mill fell into financial trouble and they were forced to sell the dams as a distressed asset to a small little company called Brookfield Renewables, and that company has since applied for an electricity export permit to send that electricity out of Canada to the United States in the middle of a trade war with no or very little benefit to the people who live in the region, the province, and the country. Now, about 1 month ago, as a local member of Parliament, I submitted a letter to Canada's energy regulator demanding public hearings in the city of Powell River at the earliest possible opportunity regarding Brookfield's permit request, to give a chance for the people who the regulator's decision will affect the most to have their say. Here we are, 1 month later, still no response. So my question for you is, why the silence, and will the regulator commit to hold public hearings in the city of Powell River regarding this very important issue?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I'll have to start by noting that the decision of where and exactly when to hold the oral public hearing, that's a decision of the independent commission. So it's not a decision that I can make here. It's my understanding the commission has committed to holding an oral hearing. The location and the exact dates, the commission has not yet communicated. And so I'm not in a position to elaborate on where it will be.
Okay, thank you. Well, I hope that you can pass along to some of the people that you're working with that to try to have a bit more rapid correspondence with the local member of Parliament, as we have been waiting a month. And if there have been developments, we would like to know, because it is very important for the people that live in Powell River, regardless of political persuasion, that they are able to have their say on this very important issue. Now, in Canada, we like to talk a lot about clean renewable energy, electrification, domestic self-sufficiency. And yet in provinces like British Columbia, endowed with massive hydroelectric resources, in recent years we've actually become an electricity importer from primarily the United States. So in this context, does the Canada Energy Regulator believe it makes sense to be granting export permits to corporately owned power producers so they can send that finite electricity that is being generated here out of the country? Or is that something that is even part of the consideration?
So what gets looked at in the context of applications to export electricity is spelled out in the Canada Energy Regulator Act. There are two specific requirements. One is related to impacts on neighboring provinces, and the other is what we refer to as the fair market access requirement. And that effectively requires that if electricity is to be exported, then would-be Canadian buyers of that electricity have an opportunity to purchase the electricity on, I would say, similar or similar enough terms and conditions as the export. So the considerations beyond that, are not contemplated in the Act, but that fair market access requirement, I understand, is the core issue that's being considered as part of that hearing on the Powell River export application.
Okay, thank you very much for your answer. And really quickly, Mr. LeBurn, if I can direct a question towards you. How reliant are East Coast refineries on foreign oil or oil which transit through the United States at the moment? Do you have that information?
Pass it to my colleague, Mike Rao.
Sure. So, I'll try and get the numbers off the top of my head, but Eastern Canada imports about 500,000 barrels per day. I think about 80% of that is from the U.S. and the rest from other countries. In around 700,000 barrels per day transits the U.S. into Southern Ontario, goes into Montreal. Eventually, some of that gets into Lévis. So, I think would just say most of that region is supplied by Canadian crude. My understanding is the biggest rationale for Eastern Canadian refiners bringing in crude is because it has to come in by ship at this point. So there are some infrastructure.
Thank you both. Excuse me, we'll move on to our final speaker, Mr. Saini. You have 5 minutes.
thank you for witnesses to be here. We are talking about doubling the capacity of the grid by 2050. How many jobs is it going to create? Do we have any idea about that?
The short answer is we don't have a specific number. The electricity strategy does refer to the hundreds of thousands of Canadians that work in and around the energy system. And part of it will depend on the type of build out we see. Different types of electricity infrastructure have different types of employment patterns. But sufficient to say, with that amount of economic activity, it's not just electricity jobs where we'll see benefits. It's the caterers and the construction companies and the fleet managers and the others. There'll be a spillover effect across the entire Canadian economy because electricity is so prevalent in every part of the country.
In the recent announcement about the major project, there's a Northwest grid proposed for British Columbia that is going to link British Columbia with Northwest territories. Is that the type of development that we should be seeing across Canada to help reduce all those barriers that we have?
Thank you very much for the question. So without commenting on that specific project, although it is referenced as part of the Northwest Conservation Corridor project, I think the contention is that we are likely to see benefits the more we're able to connect east-west and then north-south, including up to the territories in particular. It's very challenging to run an isolated grid where you're heavily reliant on diesel for the most part, and it means you're constrained for energy supply. Costs tend to be much, much higher. And so over time, connecting the territories to the continental grid in the provinces could be very advantageous. It's a long-term expensive endeavor, but something that could be transformational of their energy systems.
Thank you. Mr. Christie, in your opening remarks, you said you are issuing about 170 international permits. Is that only U.S. or do we have other countries which are also participating in that?
So specifically in the context of electricity, power lines, as well as electricity export authorizations, those would all be to the United States. The CER is not involved in authorizing trade between provinces. And to this point, we do not, there are no designated interprovincial power lines either. So that's why our jurisdiction currently of active facilities and export authorizations is all to the U.S.
Thank you. Mr. Lieber, can you detail the electricity project being advanced by the federal government to make Canada more energy secure in both clean and conventional energy?
Well, I would say, Mr. Chair, it would be a very long list. There are hundreds of projects that the federal government is actively supporting across the energy system right now. Dozens of programs that in their different ways are supporting it. And that's before we talk about the broad-based investment tax credit regime that supports every kind of project that qualifies. But I would say is that every year Natural Resource Canada does publish major projects inventory. We've been doing so for over a decade now, almost 20 years. And you can very quickly through that resource see what some of the trends for major projects are in energy and other natural resources. It may be a useful reference for this report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Colleagues, that brings to an end our first panel. Let me, on your behalf, thank our witnesses. Just to Mr. Leyburn, I wonder, because the electricity strategy has come up a number of times, if you might formally table that with the committee, and Mr. Tucker also had a request, and the committee would appreciate receiving those numbers, that evidence. And with that, colleagues, we are going to suspend for a few moments, and we'll start our new panel in about 5-7 minutes. Welcome back, colleagues. Welcome back, colleagues. We'll now resume the meeting. I'd like to welcome our second set of witnesses. And a number of them are on the screen, as you see, all by video conference, in fact. So as individuals, we have with us Normand Mousseau, a scientific director and professor of physics, Trottier Energy Institute, University of Montreal. Blake Schaefer, associate professor, University of Calgary. Professor Schaefer, you have 2 University of Calgary grads.
I'm not a grad.
You're not a grad?
No, not at UC. I was the vice president.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. Well, I am a grad, so there you go. So I'm going to give Mr. Schaefer or Professor Schaefer special treatment. And from HEC Montreal, Pierre-Olivier Pinault, professor and chair in energy sector management. And all witnesses have conducted a mandatory witness onboarding test so they can participate virtually. And I'd like to make a few comments for the benefit of the new witnesses. Committee members may ask questions in either English or French. And if you need interpretation, please take a moment now to prepare your earpiece and select the listening channel you need in order to take full advantage of the time allotted for questions and answers. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair, and each of you will have 5 minutes for your opening remarks, after which we will open the floor to questions. And Mr. Mousseau, we're going to start with you. You have the floor for 5 minutes. Oh, sorry. Is that right? Yes, Mr. Mousseau first.
Monsieur le Président, Mesdames.
Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen, members of Parliament, thank you for inviting me to appear today. The issues related to the topic you're considering are wide-ranging. 5 minutes is insufficient to address them, so I'll focus your attention on a single point. Canada's electrification, its transportation, heat generation for buildings and industry and so forth, is not only a climate issue, but increasingly an issue of productivity and our ability to remain competitive in a changing world. So that must be spoken to directly. For over 40 years now, electricity as a share of Canada's final energy mix has remained stagnant at 17%. Meanwhile, in other OECD countries, it's been growing for decades. And in China, the electricity share has risen from 15% in 2025 to over 32% in 2025, over 20 years then. This growth has involved the development, mastery, production, and large-scale deployment of electrical technologies across all sectors. While other countries invent and deploy 21st century energy technologies, Canada is content to use technologies dating back to the 20th, if not the 19th century. The National Electrification Strategy that was presented last week aims to double electricity generation in Canada. This is a step in the right direction to make up our technology and climate deficits, but it's not enough, far from it. As new generation capacity is rolled out, we must ensure that the bulk of it is used to phase out fossil fuel technologies and modernize how we use electricity, rather than simply using it for data centers, let's say. To get there, we cannot rely on the approaches deployed in recent years, which have failed to bring about real change. There's an urgent need for strategies that are genuinely innovative to roll out genuine electrification. We must accept asymmetric decarbonization. We must tailor policies to each sector's stage of transition. Where solutions are available, we must accelerate their deployment, and where they remain uncertain, we must support R&D and experimentation. We need to support the new rather than penalize the old. Society will move away from fossil fuels when renewable technologies are superior, and they are superior. More and more now, they're more convenient, they're less costly, they're more practical, and we need to support these new technologies rather than targeting fossil fuel supply. And of course, we need to pay attention to prices. In Canada, this is an essential factor, and we've seen prices go up and down, and these are chances to decarbonize our economy more quickly. We must plan and implement to accelerate the transition and demonstrate its economic benefits for Canada. It's insufficient to simply review our high-level approach. We need to develop strategies to support and deploy technologies that will be effective. We need to project ourselves into the future. Look at the architecture of a carbon-neutral economy. How would such an economy organize transportation, heating, and electricity? We need to identify the sequence of necessary physical changes to get there. You can't use electricity that's not available, so you need to set everything into place together to support new technologies and innovations. We need, finally, to examine the obstacles, pinpoint barriers, and catalysts, and then adopt appropriate measures with strategic supports. We need to measure and adapt quickly using key indicators that are updated in real time. At the same time, we need to support innovation. There are massive investments in electricity generation and distribution, but we also need to electrify energy and use. That needs investment as well. In Canada, we tend to not notice that those investments can favor innovation as well. So we need not only to support fundamental research, basic research, we need to ensure that new products coming to market are integrated with reality by better structures, a better way to go public with investments, and to really favor Canada's position in these new technologies. We're quite absent right now. For a country with a hesitant, risk-averse relationship to innovation, upping the pace, as we're trying to do now, without a real innovation policy, risks pushing public services and contracting authorities back towards well-established solutions without innovation. In conclusion, we need to electrify our society's energy. It's essential for our climate goals, but also it's essential to keep Canada's economy competitive. The newly announced National Electrification Strategy is a step in the right direction, as I've said. True, deploying the infrastructure needed to generate electricity is a provincial jurisdiction, but the federal government must adopt a robust plan to electrify our energy end use with a cohesive strategy to modernize our energy use while increasing the country's competitiveness. This must get done. It's urgently needed. Thank you, Mr. Mousseau.
I'll move to Mr. Schaefer. Or Professor Schaefer, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, Mesdames et Messieurs, les membres du comité, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, members of the committee.
My name is Blake Schaefer. I'm an associate professor of economics at the University of Calgary, where I co-founded the university's Electricity Centre. I also co-direct Canada's Energy Modelling Hub and lead a new initiative called Western Transmission Catalysts. I'm a frequent policy advisor to the governments of Alberta, British Columbia, and Canada. And before academia, I spent 15 years in an industry trading electricity and natural gas. Let me begin today with the big picture. The IEA has recently declared we are entering the age of electricity. That phrase captures two simultaneous shifts. The first is cleaner supply. This means more wind, solar, nuclear, geothermal, and hydro in the generation mix. The second is greater electrification. This means more of our vehicles, furnaces, and factories running on electricity instead of fossil fuels. Canada has a strong starting point on both. Nationally, we are already over 80% clean, though that number differs greatly from province to province. We also have a flexibility advantage from our large hydro fleet that the rest of the world can only envy. But other countries are moving faster on the second dimension of electrification. In the last 15 years, China has gone from electricity making up 15% of its final energy demand to over 30%. Over the same period, Canada has only moved from 21 to 24%. The world is electrifying, and Canada has every natural advantage to lead, but we can also be left behind if we don't act. Today, I want to flag two areas, one macro, one micro, where I see significant wins on the table if we seize them. The first is interprovincial transmission. 43 years ago, my father testified before a federal committee much like this one, arguing for stronger interties between the Western provinces. The case he made then is essentially the same one I will make today, but critically much has changed to make this idea even more compelling. We now have far more variable renewables, which benefit enormously from geographic diversity, like pairing BC Hydro's reservoirs with Alberta's abundant and cheap wind and solar. Similarly, Manitoba offers flexibility that can help enable Saskatchewan's nuclear ambitions. And a surge in expected load growth from data centers and broader electrification means opportunities abound, opportunities we simply cannot capture working province by province. Finally, our relationship with the United States has become more tenuous. Canada still trades more power with the US than we do across our own provincial borders, and that trade is valuable. But we should also look within to reduce our dependence and strengthen our competitiveness. The political ambition to expand interprovincial transmission is here. What's missing is the how. This is where the Western Transmission Catalyst project comes in. With the support of all 4 Western provinces and working with utilities, grid operators, and First Nations across the West, our team is tackling the long-standing commercial, regulatory, and physical barriers that have kept stronger interprovincial transmission stuck on the drawing board. We will have more to share publicly on this initiative in the coming months, but I will tell you this. In 25 years in this sector, I've never seen a stronger likelihood of success. The second big win is flexible demand. Consider electric vehicles. 1 million EVs in my home province of Alberta would add roughly 3 to 4% to annual electricity demand. That is manageable. But 1 million EVs all charging at the same time would increase our province's peak capacity needs by 50%. That is not manageable. We stand at a fork in the road. One path leads to the bad place, higher peaks, massive upgrades to our distribution networks, and higher costs spread across everyone. But it doesn't need to be that way. The other path is flexible demand, consumers shifting consumption away from peak periods, making fuller use of existing networks, and spreading system costs over a larger base, resulting in lower average costs for all. Around the world, we're seeing the growth of time-varying rates and demand flexibility services as low-cost alternatives to expensive peaking supply. Mr. Chair, Canada has an enviable starting position and all the tools needed to succeed, but we must act. In the age of electricity, a robust and affordable electricity system will be a key competitive advantage. Interprovincial transmission and a concerted push on demand flexibility are 2 big wins on the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Schaefer. Now we'll go to Mr. Pinot. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. It's really a pleasure to be here. I'm Pierre-Olivier Pinot. I'm the chair of Energy Sector Management at HEC Montréal. I publish every year the state of energy in Quebec for the last 12 years. And I've been looking for the last 30 years and then being specialized in energy and electricity policy. So it's to my great pleasure that I saw that last week or recently, the Canadian government mentioned its national electricity strategy with a key element that Blake mentioned on interprovincial trade and interconnections. This is really the key aspect of my personal research that I've been actually working on, and I was extremely pleased to see that priority to come at the highest level, at the federal level. I really think more interprovincial collaboration is key for the future of our country. In 2013, I published a paper called Fragmented Market, Canadian Electricity Sector's Underperformance, to basically explain why we were underperforming in Canada across with our 10 different electricity markets, because we were not better integrated. So I strongly believe in integration. In 2016, I published a paper looking at Ontario and Quebec, exactly describing what Blake was mentioning, you know, the benefits of integrating a thermal jurisdiction with a hydro jurisdiction, where you can actually reduce greenhouse gas emissions while creating welfare. So in such cases, it pays to reduce greenhouse gases, because you can substitute hydroelectricity to thermal generation and increase welfare. Because and then especially if you use marginal cost pricing in both jurisdictions, which is not the case in hydro jurisdictions like British Columbia, Manitoba, and Quebec. We are using average cost pricing, which is bringing some inefficiencies within the market. So interties are very important, and I'm a strong advocate for increasing interconnections between provinces. But it's not only a matter of transmission lines, it's also a matter of how you design markets and how trade is settled. You really need to move pricing to a different level if you want to optimize our markets. So that's an important point, which I think the government needs to hear. So in the strategy that was presented by the federal government, the mention of doubling the electricity production was emphasized. And this is something we need to be extremely concerned. Because there is one aspect that we don't pay enough attention to is the issue that Canada is suffering from energy obesity. We are using so much energy in Canada that places us 8th in the world in per capita energy consumption between Oman and Saudi Arabia. But not only are we using a lot of energy in general, we are using it extremely poorly. We are among the least productive countries when it comes to energy productivity. We are in the same group as Kazakhstan and North Korea when it comes to energy productivity. And what is it? What is energy productivity? It's the amount of wealth, the amount of GDP that we generate with 1 gigajoule of energy or 1 unit of energy. In Canada, we basically produce $146 per gigajoule we consume. In the US, they produce 223. In Australia, a country that we can compare to Canada because they have a strong natural resources basis in their economy, they produce $217 of GDP per every gigajoule. Again, Canada only produces 146 gigajoule. We are not extracting as much wealth from every gigajoule we're using, and that's because of a good reason. We're blessed with abundance of energy, and we've never really paid attention to how much energy we're using to generate wealth. That has to change. Both Blake and Normand, my estimated colleagues, mentioned the low level of electricity in our final consumption. Around 24% in our final consumption is electricity in Canada. But they omitted to mention that on average, per capita, Canada is using 13,000 kilowatt hour per year, compared to China's 6,000. So 13,000 for Canada per capita per year, 6,000 kilowatt hours in China. And this is the same amount in Germany and France, or about the same. So we're already using twice the amount of electricity per capita China, Germany, or France are using. So the goal is not to double electricity generation just for the sake of using even more electricity than what we're using now to generate very little wealth. The real goal to make Canada stronger and more productive is to use energy and electricity more efficiently, more wisely. And in our session's title, Canada's Electrification, Energy Self-Sufficiency, and Domestic Energy Security, the energy security part has to be important. And you don't become more secure by having bigger infrastructure. If you want to become more secure, you make sure you're less vulnerable, less exposed, and you make sure you use less energy while providing the same services to make sure basically you don't overexpose yourself to many different risks, geopolitics, climate risk, and cybersecurity threats that will come in the future. I believe my time is over. I will stop here.
It is. Thank you, Professor Pinault. 3 very interesting presentations. I know colleagues will have some good questions for you. And we are going to start with Mr. Tucker.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to our witnesses. Mr. Schaefer, this is a very interesting personal story that your father was in front of a committee similar to this 43 years ago to talk about what we needed to do for interchanges between provinces. Can you give a quick update on all the projects that have gone forward in the last 43 years that have achieved what your father testified 43 years ago at?
So at the time, they were talking about a Western power grid from Manitoba across to British Columbia, where there was going to be fully integrated. That didn't go to fruition. Most of the provinces looked southward towards more trade with the United States. We have seen over that period the expansion of the Alberta-British Columbia tie line to its current state, which remains a relatively small share, I would say, of both provinces' expansion. We've seen some minor additions between Saskatchewan and Manitoba as well. But the broader idea of a Western, more integrated Western power grid never came to fruition.
Many things in this country, it's unfortunate that the past Liberal governments have made some decisions that have weakened us and made us more reliant on our neighbors. And you brought up the interchanges with America, and there are reports that on the business side of things is that we sell natural gas to the States, they create electricity, and then we buy it back. Can you unpack that a little bit and how that makes sense?
I would say on electricity trade, I think one thing to keep in mind, and actually last year was quite a special year. We were, if not net importers, we came very close to it, which is rare for our country. Normally we're a net exporter. And the large reason for that is the droughts in the major hydro provinces, Quebec, Manitoba, and BC. But an important thing to note is that while we were actually net importing in those provinces, we continue to also be a net importer of dollars. So the benefit of hydro is we're able to be quite flexible. So we use it almost, you can think of it like a large battery. So we tend to export when prices are high and import when prices are low. And that flexibility earns our provincial, in those three places, Crown corporations, significant amounts of money. So like all three of those were net importers, although those three provinces were net importers last year. I believe Quebec was almost break even on dollars. Manitoba and British Columbia continue to earn trade revenue, net trade revenue on that. So our selectivity makes it quite advantageous for the hydro provinces to be able to transact with their neighbors.
That's on hydro, but what about on natural gas? Are we shipping that much natural gas to the States to to create electricity for us to buy it back?
Oh, good question. I mean, if I'm looking at Alberta natural gas, the stuff going to the Pacific Northwest, there's limited natural gas resources in the Pacific Northwest. We tend to buy from the Pacific Northwest and the Western system as a whole when the renewables are in abundance, because that's when prices are low. So if you look at flows into the BC, across the BC intertie, that tends to be not when natural gas is on the margin. Those are expensive time periods for the United States. We tend to be importing in the middle of day when California has too much solar or when it's extremely windy.
And just back to on the natural gas share of business or the share of our grid right now. I understand there's a little bit of a shifting of percentages, and renewables do have a role to play, and it's encouraged. But we're hearing increasing concerns that the regulatory processes in the States is much easier to bring on a natural gas plant than up here. Would you agree with that statement, that it's easier to get one built on the regulatory and permitting side in the States right now?
You know, I can't say with definiteness because I'm not a developer. I can say this, that currently one of the biggest impediments to natural gas power investment is actually equipment lead times. So right now you can't buy a turbine for delivery before about 2032. So we're actually at a point where supply chain is almost more of a limiter than any permitting process.
Terry. Thank you for your testimony today.
Thank you, Mr. Tucker. Thank you both. Mr. Hogan, 6 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses today. Professor Schaefer, good to see you again. Former colleague of mine at the University of Calgary, and the University of Alberta in Canada benefit from your knowledge, as we benefit from the knowledge of all of our witnesses today. So, Canada has many grids. Canada has many energy clusters. It is a north-south continent, and integrations are often north-south rather than east-west. That's true of gas, oil, electricity. And in some ways, that makes a great deal of sense. Geography and market size push us that way. They push us south. Economics drive us that way. Easier terrain, better customer bases in the sense that they're bigger customer bases. And this study is looking at both energy security and opportunities in electricity at the same time, I think in part because we know our energy future is an electricity future. And so, Professor Schaefer, Professor Pinot, you both talked about flexible demand, interprovincial ties, and you underlined that these are not just technical challenges. And I think about my home jurisdiction of Alberta and just how very different market design is between Alberta and BC. in particular. And I'm wondering if you could both expand on some of the considerations, hurdles for interprovincial interties, and maybe not even just interties, because that's like a physical thing, but like the trading of electricity between markets, technical and otherwise. And maybe we can start with you, Mr. Schaefer.
Okay. I can offer some of my professional background. I started my career at PowerX, the trading arm of BC Hydro, for 7 years. Went to New York, and then I returned to Canada. I was head trader at TransAlta, which is Alberta's largest merchant. So I'm well versed in the trading activity across the two. There's many things, Mr. Chair, that become an impediment beyond just the physical act of linear infrastructure. Simple things like scheduling timelines, where in the Western U.S. we schedule 60 minutes to the hour, and Alberta schedules need to be in 2 hours before. Simple, we call these seams issues, which make inefficiencies between the two. The biggest challenge for BC Alberta tie-up, as compared to, say, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, where our Western Transmission Catalyst is already also working, is market differences, where, like Pierre-Olivier mentioned, in BC, you have a Crown corporation, average cost pricing, vertically integrated from generation all the way down to the retail level. In Alberta, we have a disaggregated market, so we have competitive generation, we have regulated transmission and distribution, and again, a competitive retail. That introduces a lot of complexity because you're going to get elements of winners and losers, like in any trade, and you have a multitude of participants that you need to find some alignment on. In addition to the fact that you have this, what we call marginal cost pricing in Alberta and average cost pricing in British Columbia, bridging that is challenging, but that's exactly the type of thing that we're working on, is those concrete details for commercial arrangements to not gloss over that really important issue. I'll hand it over to Pierre.
Yeah, we've seen different countries in the world trying to integrate their markets. I spent some years in Finland during my PhD, and I could experience 4 different countries, Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Denmark, converging and changing their market design to basically adopt a similar market design to solve the issues Blake extremely well labeled and then presented very well. So in a way, it's really a pity that our 10 Canadian provinces cannot converge, and even 2 of these provinces cannot converge towards a similar market design to make sure that they can actually trade and plan in a more integrated manner to basically save on so many aspects that I won't detail here. But every time the OECD is coming to make a review of Canadian energy policies, then basically they always mention in their reports, not every year, it's every 4 or 5 years, they always mention Canadian provinces should better integrate their and then should open up to trade and competition because there are so many barriers between provinces. So that's part of the problem, is that basically we don't trade enough. We have 2 very different systems, 10 different systems. We really need to integrate at all the levels of planning, systems operation, and dispatch.
Thank you. And so when we think about trying to push the country as a government to think more east-west and less north-south to increase energy security as we move forward, and as I've said, that's sort of tied to electricity intrinsically, what should we be thinking about? Because it does seem to me that there are going to be trade-offs when we do that, not least of which is that many of our provinces work on commercial terms with the United States. They make a lot of money, as has already been mentioned, trading with them. Our interests are broader than that, to try to make sure that Canada can have a secure energy future. What do we need to be thinking about, and what should be reflected in this report?
I can just offer 2 quick things. One, in my activity with the provinces, one thing that's become abundantly clear, and not to be disrespectful to anyone there in the federal government, is the feds need to support, not lead. The provinces are fiercely guarded of their provincial jurisdiction on this matter, and they do have the expertise, so that we're looking for really support from the federal government. Of course, financial support is something no one turns down, but it's really coordinating and convening support, but leaving the leadership to provinces. The other, on an optimistic note, I think there's a broad recognition that we aren't at this point fighting over the division of the pie. And that's been sort of something that's held us back for all of those years that I talked intervening between my father's remarks and today. there really is an expanded pie of opportunities here because of this looming large load growth going on in electricity. And so I think provinces are recognizing that they can't fully capture it without looking at cooperation. I think that's important to recognize.
I may add that not only there's a bigger pie, but there are efficiency gains to be made. So basically, the pie gets bigger if we collaborate. That's one of my paper's conclusion, and then it's really actually easy economics conclusion to whenever you trade, you generate welfare through efficiency. So what we need to document these benefits. We need to better document these benefits of collaboration to different provinces so that, yes, there will be losers, as Blake mentioned, but these losers could be compensated because there is a bigger pie. So there are ways to make everyone winning in the new system.
Thank you. Thank you all. And as we say at every one of our meetings, we welcome briefs, we welcome papers. Professor, if Pinault, if you want to table that paper, we'd appreciate it. We're on now to Monsieur Simon, 6 minutes.
6 minutes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will try to put questions that meet with everyone's approval in order to avoid having Mr. Pinault and Mr. Monceau disagree further. I know very much what you disagree on, so I'll try to help you out. All right. So, Mr. Monceau, we've often discussed our technological backwardness here in Canada, and I would like to know, given that you've brought that up, more about two very interesting elements of that, and this is where I can reconcile you perhaps. There's the management of peak capacity, and there's the energy efficiency issue. Those are the two issues. So in our technological catch-up, if you were to specify specific sectors that the government should focus its immediate and medium-term action on, what would that be? In a report that we published in October of 2025 entitled Changer de Cap, or Change, we identify sectors such as building, where we can reduce carbon use, and there are industrial processes as well. There is knowledge that we could develop and lean on here in Canada and even around the world. Transportation, of course, there's individual transportation, and then there is transportation in general on the roads and so on. Canada could be more active and contribute to innovation using new technologies and current technologies. I could add that the building sector, there's a lot we could get there by making them far more energy efficient with the thermal siding and so on. We also need to update our building codes and ensure that building owners know how much energy they're using and receive like a rating. Natural Resources Canada does create these ratings, but they needn't necessarily be used such that people who own buildings don't even know how much energy they're using. So they're not encouraged to improve their energy use. There are a number of electro technologies that do have a role to play, and the federal government could play a greater role in rating buildings' use of energy, and in transportation, of course, that has to be electrified, and we, of course, have to reduce the use of individual cars and trucks. We need to use trains and other modes of transportation. And of these modes of transportation cost less than buying a car, be it an electric car. I would like to go back to a question that my colleague Corey Hogan put to you recently about the idea of east-west corridors to replace north-south ones. Recently, I met Electrification Canada, and Hydro-Quebec was involved in that meeting, and we were told that when it comes to pricing and efficiency, the east-west corridor wasn't necessarily the best because they were thinking of zones of interest that they've already decided to focus on. So if I'm bringing this up, it's just to hear from you what's the best idea in short and term and in the medium term when it comes to efficiency, given that there's only so many resources to invest. And people are already investing in existing corridors. Shouldn't we work on the efficiency of those corridors that already exist rather than trying to create this east-west integration? I'm not trying to trap you here. I'm just trying to understand what you have to say on this, because there seems to be some sort of distortion in Hydro-Quebec's position, at least. Transmission interties towards the south or out of Quebec westward to Ontario will create more flexibility in the grid. It's not about having to keep the north-south axis, and the east-west one wouldn't necessarily prevent a north-south one. Same for wind power. There's more diversity of wind power available if we go east-west, for example. So there are advantages. Basically, it would help us balance our sources. NRCan recently funded studies involving Alberta, BC, and the Atlantic provinces, showing that interties are already viable and bring down costs. But local governments didn't want to pick up on this or go ahead with this. The Atlantic grid, for example, could be improved, linking all the provinces out there. There's a lot that they could gain from that. Nova Scotia, for example, wants to have wind farms beyond in the waters around Nova Scotia, and these interties east-west are necessary. Obviously, we're not thinking of a line, transmission line, all the way from BC to Nova Scotia, but linking the provinces amongst each other going east to west. Thank you. Mr. Martin, you have 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Mousseau, I'd like to know what you think of the reliability of the new wind park generation forecasts. Looking at Uranus, for example, we have organizations, it's not my specialty, but they are evaluating the effects of wind farms. And I don't think there are many issues there. And wind farms are being improved. Their production capacity, generation capacity is being improved. How much they generate over a certain period of time with improved design. So we're learning more and more about being able to predict the electricity generated by wind farms. We're wondering how Quebec can really guarantee its energy security. For example, if we get climate changes and there's less water coming down through the dams, what do you think that's going to do? This is nothing new. We know that about every 10 years, we get a typical dry year, and usually there's a second dry year that follows. But models show that climate change will actually bring more rain in the north and in Quebec. By an average, of course, doesn't mean that every year we'll see more rain, more precipitation, but despite the fact that we have seen some dryness in the last 3 or 4 years, looking overall, over time, we can see that we'll actually be getting more water in the east. Quebec, of course, is really aiming to electrify its transportation sector, but this will really lead to peak demands in the winter for electricity. So I'd like to know from you, do we have sufficient capacity to guarantee energy security during peak capacity demand? We are working on the peaks. Of course, the winter peak has to be managed more intelligently, and there are technologies to do so, especially by shifting the demand. But it's doable, and this is being analyzed as we speak. Hydro-Quebec, however, is planning for important investments that would add a lot of kilowatt hours that will truly suffice. And this is the sort of thing that we see around the world. Let's keep our eyes open. This is where people are headed around the world, adopting the best technologies. We can turn a blind eye and say we should keep the sort of stuff we used last century, but it's certainly to our advantage to remain competitive and to master the new technologies. And if demand grows quickly, is it realistic to depend solely on hydroelectricity and intermittent energy generators like, wind and so on without having, biomass and nuclear? Well, we need to ensure that we have sufficient supply. And generating it, there's many ways to do so. There's solar, there's photovoltaic, same thing, and then wind, of course, which is different. And you've mentioned biomass. There are ways to ensure diverse supply that will still be green, and that's where we need to head. Mr. Pino, economically speaking, what's the real risk of new clean energy projects? What's the possibility that they'll just eat a mass of money and not be helpful long term, especially the rates when they cost 12 to 13 cents a kilowatt hour to produce, but the public isn't ready to pay that for their electricity. So that's the risk, that we develop these new technologies, the price goes up, but society doesn't accept it. Unfortunately, Hydro-Quebec, same thing for Ontario with its nuclear. Major projects are put forward, but with insufficient communication about how the price is going to be covered. Ontario is going nuclear with the help of the feds, and in Quebec, consumers are all paying a little higher to fund new projects, but we don't have a good price signal for the real cost of the electricity down the road. It's very nice to have electricity, but unfortunately, social acceptability is also needed, and we should ensure that the eventual cost of the projects is well understood by all ahead of time.
Merci d'être là. On a présentement...
Thank you for being here. We now have Canada's 3 foremost experts on energy. I believe we have the 2 stars in Quebec. Thanks for being here. Dr. Mousseau and Dr. Pino, it's about a decade now that we've been working on energy issues, working with HEC, and it's always a pleasure to see you. My question is addressed to both of you. Dr. Mousseau, during your introduction, you mentioned new technologies that Canada could make use of. Could you give us a few examples of them? For buildings, there are the heat pumps and so on, but for the manufacturing around the world, people are developing new approaches. In Canada, if we were to adopt and use such technologies with a structure that supports the emergence of new service industries to use them, then we could become a leader, a world leader. So installing a heat pump, it's not that easy. You need to really understand how they work, and we've seen several examples of failures to, set them in Canada. A lot of money has been lost. So that's for the technologies. Transportation, the personal electric vehicle needs to be emphasized, but also move into sectors that are underdeveloped around the world, but that are promising. This is how Canada can decarbonate quickly and become competitive. Thank you very much. So much is said about technology these days, and we rely on it a great deal. But I'd like to hear a bit about governance and social issues, politics across provinces, and the ISO complexity, for example. Could you, Dr. Mousseau, tell us a bit about all that? Elaborate on that, on governance. Are there lessons that our government could learn if we want to double electricity generation? One of the issues, of course, is the cost. As Pierre-Olivier was mentioning, the cost of electricity, the cost is rising. It's low compared to oil, but how can we ensure that all citizens will be able to afford electricity? If I've got a large vehicle and I electrify it, I feed it electricity, and the rates go up, I'll still be saving money. But if I live in the city, if my electricity costs more, it's just going to cost more, period, for me. So how can we share the rising cost equally? Planners also need to understand that we can't really tweak the demand. We'll have to produce more electricity at the outset than we actually need to make it easier to innovate. And there will be tension at that point. Who's going to be paying for that extra electricity that we're not necessarily using or using efficiently? Dr. Pinault. I really enjoyed your reference to energy obesity.
Do energy intermittent fasting. Donc merci pour ce terme-là.
So thanks so much for this term, energy efficiency. I think it would be easy to really do something about that. It's a low-hanging fruit, a real opportunity. Could you elaborate on how we could make better use of energy efficiency? There are 2 or 3 reasons why we should go there. First, it costs less if you use less. But if it costs less, why aren't we doing it? Because we don't have incentives, and we're not used to thinking about efficiency in Canada, unfortunately. Luckily, we've got an abundance of energy, and that has led us to be very careless. Consider the Europeans, where it all costs a lot more, and they have geopolitical issues. They're quite quick to pick up on energy efficiency and to enact it. But if we did it here as well, it would be really good for our economy. Energy security. Well, when the electricity is cut because you've got a tornado or you're being attacked, you'll be doing much better in passive houses that are well insulated than a house that absolutely needs a lot of electricity to stay livable. If you've got buildings that are high performance thermically and so on, this is better for our security, it's better for our electricity, it's better for costing, it's better for across the board.
Simard, 2.5 minutes.
Mr. Simard, 2.5 minutes. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Very briefly, 2.5 minutes. It's not a lot of time, gentlemen. As politicians, we are often approached by people with economic ideas and industrial ideas, and it's always the main problem. Are you going to get the energy to do this? An energy block. And even if you get the energy, you've got to manage the peak capacity issues, and this is often an issue for Hydro-Québec. And perhaps poor management, as Mr. Pinault was pointing out, leads to energy inefficiency. So how in Quebec, I know we're going to solve the whole issue like here today, but how in Quebec could we manage to adopt practices that are better to allow economic projects to, have more space? I know that, for example, there are companies that offer batteries to manage peak capacity. There must be other ways to do this as well. How can we support our industrial sector by giving them access to energy? Something that we studied peak capacity, and we know that we could move millions of watts using thermal storage or basically batteries. This is a sort of strategy that could be used outside of Quebec. Eventually, everyone will be using electricity for heating, and there will be the winter peak capacity issue for everyone. Changing behavior, when you analyze it, it's really essential that we do it when you want to really deal with the winter peak. So my answer, I'm not quite sure I totally understood your question, but anyway, for new energy projects, I think we need to let the market help make the decisions, not politicize the industrialization. You tell an industry, look, you want energy, but go buy your energy, go see the companies that produce energy and so on, and the electricity generation companies in your province, and then buy it, not based on something that the federal government wants to institute. That's the best approach. Rather than allowing the government to decide who's going to get energy, it's up to the consumers to take action and work the market. Thank you.
Speaking spots, Mr. Tucker and Ms. McKelvey. We're going to be going a little bit over, colleagues, but I think that's all right. So, Mr. Tucker, you have 5 minutes or less.
All right. Thank you, Chair. We'll see how we get through on my questions. Mr. Pinot, are you concerned about the low rainfall causing Quebec to be forced to import more electricity from other jurisdictions?
Well, it's a concern, but it's not such a big problem because fortunately we do have interties with Ontario, so we import cheap nuclear power at night, and it helps Ontario, it helps us, keeping water in the reservoir, and then so that's why actually I am in favor of more interties with neighbors to be able to manage better these situations.
And how would you square that with the support of nuclear from the people of Quebec?
Well, we don't really need nuclear power at this point in Quebec because we do have large supply of hydro. We do have multi-year reservoirs.
Hold on, I just want to clarify. So you just said that you relied on it with low water, but now you don't want to rely on it, or the province doesn't?
Well, we rely on access to imports from different places, and one place is Ontario, and we take benefit of the current over generation at night in Ontario because Ontario has over generation at night, and then that benefits both Quebec and Ontario because Ontario finds a market for its surplus nuclear power and Quebec finds some sources of imports. Quebec has been doing that for decades, and then now it's important. But I will.
Is it widely known within the public of Quebec how reliant they are on nuclear? No,
I mean, they rely partly for their supply, but no, it's not widely known that Quebec imports so much, but those who look at the system know that.
Do you think the federal government should be advertising and communicating that in Quebec so that there's a better understanding where their electricity is coming from?
Yeah, I think yes, everyone should better know and better understand the role of interconnections and the diversity of supply.
Just to wrap up, one question. If you had your magic wand and you had one regulation or one thing to change that would help our country out, I know you've talked a lot about interchanges and some of the other ones, but I'm interested if there's one thing that the current government isn't doing that should be done in the future. If you could just submit one idea.
Well, for electricity, it's the promotion of one single market design for all 10 provinces. Like the Norwegian market design was adopted by Sweden, Finland, and Denmark. So I would say let's follow that lead and look at Norway, how their market design was adopted by other countries.
Thank you so much for your testimony here today.
My pleasure. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Mr. Tucker. And wrapping up, Ms. McKelvey, you have 5 minutes or less.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just coming back, I think it was Professor Schaefer that said the federal government has an important convening role and that there's a big role for the provinces that need to play here. So I'm just wondering, can you really speak to, and it kind of builds on what we just heard around, what are those different electricity market structures provincially across the country? Which ones are best suited for enabling the big capital investments that need to happen for electrification? Like, who is doing this well in the country and who can we learn from?
That's an excellent question. I mean, the different market structures, broadly speaking, would be something like a vertically integrated regulated market, which is most of Canadian provinces. And then you have competitive markets where you have private actors, which is what Alberta looks like, and I'll say to some degree Ontario, although it's a mixed bag. The answer to your second part is actually very difficult because in some ways, these vertically integrated and especially crown corporations can enact the will of the province quite quickly if they so choose. A government can decide we want to do X on electric vehicles and enable them, and they can make that happen relatively quickly. Whereas in Alberta, we have to align incentives to make that happen. So in some ways, you can steer that ship centrally. But what we have seen in things like renewables are a very good example. Before Alberta's moratorium, Alberta was the capital of renewable investment in Canada because of that open market. Some of the things Pierre-Olivier talked about, where the market was open for investments. I believe 93% of data center applications are in Alberta, again, for that same reason of it's a place where if you want to do something, you can apply to do it. So that openness to private entry is something that's can be a bit more challenging in the vertically integrated markets.
And then just as a quick follow-up, the distribution systems, the utilities on the ground, a lot of times municipally owned, rate-based. Do you have any recommendations on how we can really get over those structural constraints that they have so that we can ensure they can make the capital investments that are needed? Because they have only a certain amount of debt they can get. And of course, the regulatory process for rate applications is very long. So how can we improve on really that final delivery of electricity to homes and really, ramp up electrification for the green transition?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question, because the distribution network, in my view, does not get enough attention of the big three sectors. We tend to focus on generation, and today we've been talking a lot about high voltage transmission. The challenge with distribution networks is they're all, they're necessarily regulated because they have a franchise monopoly. You don't want dual competing grids. And that can distort incentives. And so getting incentives right to do the cost minimizing thing is always a challenge. So concrete things we can look at. There's performance-based regulation where you're incentivizing non-wires alternatives where they might be cheaper than expanding the system. There's things like total expenditure rate basing rather than just capital expenditure rate basing. We tend to allow only capital expenditures in rate base, which distort decisions away from, say, operating expense, which can sometimes be cheaper. So a TOTEX rate basing is something that other jurisdictions have done. And then one very niche thing that I brought over folks from the UK recently, the regulator and companies over to Alberta to learn from them on the distribution network, is we can use in places where we don't have a full rollout of smart meters, so meters that are capable of recording consumption at an hourly level, which is essential for demand flexibility measurement. We can use technology, telemetry technology. You can meter off of a phone connection to your electric vehicle. These are things that are allowed in the UK, and it's allowing us to skip past, almost like skipping past the landline. I'm not suggesting we do full utility metering off of telemetry, but for some of these flexibility programs, this would be an area for Measurements Canada to look at potential relaxation. I think we could get a lot of gains if we were a bit more flexible there.
Thank you, colleagues. Thanks to our witnesses. This brings this meeting to an end. And colleagues, I think you'll agree, two great panels that have helped us kick off our study on Canada's electrification, energy self-sufficiency, and domestic energy security. We've had three national-level experts before us. Great testimony, great questions by colleagues, and we really appreciate you being with us today. So with that, just say, as we always do, we welcome briefs, we welcome additional information, and please send that along if the spirit moves you. So with that, colleagues, we are adjourned.